All right, so World Team Trials are coming up. They're right around the corner. And I was thinking about one of the craziest events, one of the craziest World Team Trials stories of all time. It's when a wrestler made a world team on a dare, a bet, a deal. I don't know how you want to call it, but that's basically what happened. So we'll go back to 2011, where we had the World Team Trials coming up, and Cael Sanderson was in his second year at Penn State. And now, before I go back to 2011, I wanted to go to 2020. When I was interviewing David Taylor for his upcoming match on a flow card before the Olympic Games. We were talking with David, and you know the topic on every fan's mind is like, who's the top dog in the Penn State room? Okay, this is in 2020. You've got Cael Sanderson in there, Olympic champion. Jake Varner's in there, Olympic champion. You've got Cael, an Olympic champion. You got David Taylor, who is a world champion at this point and would soon be an Olympic champion. So, you know, the question on every fan, who's the top dog in the room at Penn State? And without any hesitation, David Taylor says, it's Cael. It's still Cael. Cael is still the man in the room, which is a crazy thing to think about because this is, you know, almost 10 years removed from this story when Cael Sanderson made a comeback. Now, the circumstances in which Cael, you know, re-entered competition are sort of crazy in itself. He won the Olympics in 2004 and had, you know, basically stepped away from competition to focus on coaching. But you can imagine in 2011 how good Cael still is in the room, because we know in 2020 he's still the top dog in that room. So 2011, you got to imagine he is just, you know, massacring these high level teams and wrestlers. So a deal is struck where they say, hey, if we win Big Tens, Cael, will you compete at Northeast Regionals, which you know was like a regional tournament that would qualify for World Team Trials. And so apparently somewhere along the line, Cael agrees. He says, okay, if we win Big Tens, I'll enter this tournament. So then you go to the Big Ten tournament, and you think, oh, well, didn't Penn State win NCAAs that year? Yeah, they did. And they kind of ran away with it. They locked it up during the semifinal round. But Big Tens was a different story. And it came down to the very last match. Their heavyweight, Cam Wade, he couldn't just win against Ben Appland. He had to win by major decision in order for Penn State to win. It literally came down to the last match. Because you know, Big Tens is like, you got the finals, you got the first place match, third place match, fifth place match. Well, he had to win that fifth place match, and he had to win by bonus points for Penn State to win outright, right? And so Cam Wade does that. It makes Penn State the Big Ten champions. So they go on, they win NCAAs in 2011, and then Cael, you just show up. And you gotta remember, in 2011, it was a very different time. It seems sort of recent, but in terms of wrestling, media coverage, streaming, it's the dark ages, right? We're not live streaming as many events. Flow is a thing for sure, but we're not live streaming every event, and there's not video everywhere. But video pops up on YouTube of Cael Sanderson wrestling at Northeast Regionals at 96 kilograms. And he is just, I mean, he's wrestling Richard Perry, who in a couple years' time would be one of the top contenders to make the Olympic team at 86 kilograms. Absolute stud. And Cael is just having his way with him, scoring at will, making it look very easy. So you're like, wow, Cael looks fantastic, right? And so he wins that, and I guess the ball gets rolling, and he's like, well, maybe I'll just go to World Team Trials. Okay, and so he cuts down to 84, because at 96 kilograms, the guy he's coached, his athlete, Jake Varner's the 96 rep. So he cuts down to 84. If you've seen Cael Sanderson, big guy, makes the cut down to 84 kilograms, which was like 184.5 pounds. And he enters this bracket at the World Team Trials. And he's got to go run through a gauntlet. And waiting at the end of the gauntlet is a former Hodge Trophy winner and the world silver medalist, Jake Herbert. So on paper, everyone's like, yeah, Cael's probably still really good, but Jake Herbert, he's in his absolute prime. He was just second in the world. This is going to be a really tough challenge for Cael, if he could even get to him. So Cael runs through Raymond Jordan, runs through Chris Pendleton, and then he's got John Reeder, his former athlete. He beats all these guys, some hammers along the way, and then he gets to Jake Herbert, okay? And now you're thinking, okay, well, this is probably the Cinderella story's going to come to an end. No. Cael Sanderson dominates Jake Herbert, beats him in 2 straight matches. You saw some vintage Cael Sanderson. You saw some of his far ankle wizardry, just like he was just steps ahead of Jake every step of the way, right? And so then he makes the world team. Now, so he's our rep at 84 kilograms. He's on a teammate with this young guy who just made his first team, Jordan Burroughs, which, how's that for like a weird thing? Cael Sanderson and Jordan Burroughs were actually teammates on the world team in 2011. So then they go to the World Championships. And now, if you haven't been following freestyle wrestling for a very long time, I'm about to, and you don't like Freestyle Rules now, I assure you would have hated them back in 2011. There were just some crazy rules. So one, you had to win 2 out of 3 periods, right? So you could win the first period 6-0, which was a tech fall at that time, and then you could lose the next 2 periods, and you could outscore your opponent 6-2 and lose the match, okay? So that's your first sign that this is a fantastic rule set, right? But then there's more. So if a period ended scoreless, you would go to a ball draw. What's that? Well, they would say, hey, wrestler blue, come to this bag, put your hand in this bag, pull out another bag, and then pull out a ball, and it's gonna have a red or a blue ball. And based on whatever color that is, that person gets the leg. And so you would get on this leg. It's as ridiculous as I'm describing. This is what happened back then. So you would get on the leg, and then they would blow the whistle, and guess who would score almost every time, to the tune of like 85%. The guy on the leg, right? Very obvious. So they would just basically decide the winner based on who pulls this ball. It's a terrible system. But anyway, you can imagine how this rule set did not benefit the American style, and particularly Cael Sanderson style of offense and action and trying to score and build leads and et cetera. It was a really tough rule set for America at that point in time. So Cael enters the tournament. He loses to some really good guys, loses to an eventual Olympic champion, loses to a world medalist, and he ends up placing 5th. And it kind of sets up a huge what if. What if the rules were a little different? And what if Cael ended up medaling or even winning the world championships that year, right? Because it's 2011. Well, what's next year? 2012, Olympic Games. If he medals, he's sitting out. Would Cael have considered a comeback for the Olympic Games? It's another what if. And Cael's career as a competitor is a what if, because we saw what he did in 2004, and then we saw what he did in 2011. It's like, man, what could have happened in between there? But basically, Cael placed 5th at the World Championships, which is incredible showing, some controversial calls for sure. And then he gets back, and as you know, and as I've discussed, and anyone that's wrestling knows, wrestling and achieving wrestling greatness is a very selfish pursuit. So you got to really be thinking about yourself and how you can make yourself better and prepare yourself for competition. Well, he gets back to State College, and things aren't exactly as he hoped they would be when he returned, and he kind of made the decision then, hey, I need to hang it up and really focus and go all in on this team and Penn State. And well, it's basically worked out pretty well for him. That proved out to be a pretty good point, or a pretty good decision there. But all to say, World Team Trials are incredible, but that's maybe one of my favorite World Team Trial stories of all time.